Speaking to Sky News, the polling expert claimed the Labour Party will have to upgrade its campaign tactics to convince more voters to go to the polls at the next general election if it wants to win over the Tories, as he discussed the latest polls on the age gap among the British electorate with Sky News host Andrew Neil. So John said Jeremy Corbyn still has a lot of work to do to win despite his success at the last general election. The professor argued that despite the increase in the level of turn-up among 18 to 24 years old voters and the success of Mr Corbyn among young voters in the last general election, Labour voters are still less likely to turn up at the polls than Conservative voters. He said, "There's been an argument about the level of turn-up among younger people. One of those frustrating things about politics is that we have to wait an awfully long time before we get reliable information about turn-ups." Sky Getty John Curtis claims Labour has a lot of work to do if it wants to win the next general election. If you compare the increase in turn-up in 2017 with the increase with the level of turn-up in 2015, you cannot say that the turn-up went up markedly more among 18 to 24-year-olds. However, if we take the story further back, if we compare the level of turn-up in 2017 with the turn-up in 2001, there is a particularly marked increase among 18 to 24-year-olds, insofar as we can tell from the data that we have, although today's generations of young voters are no more likely to vote than the two or more generations to come, and that the age gap is just as wide institutionally as it has been, they are not any more reluctant. It's difficult to argue that Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party were particularly effective to gain young voters to go to the polls. On the other hand, it is now the case that the particularly marked decline that we saw among younger people 10 to 15 years ago has disappeared. As long as Labour's demographic profile is so focused on younger people, they still have a lot of work to do. So John Curtis, any political party that finds that its electorate is relatively older has reasons to be worried, simply because those voters might not be with us in 2022. On the other hand, the message is also that the Labour Party cannot presume that it can win the next election by continuing to simply pursue the strategy of "let's mobilize those people who don't otherwise vote." It's still the case, even in 2017, that Labour supporters were less likely to turn up than the Conservatives' supporters. That's a long-standing pattern, and it's not clear for all the hype that the Labour campaign, including on social media, was actually particularly effective at getting the party's supporters to the polls. Labour still have a lot of work there to do, and if one accepts that at the end of the day young voters are always going to be less likely to vote, for so long as Labour's demographic profile is so focused on younger people, it is going to be more difficult for it to get voters to the polls. Labour has dropped 4 percentage points in a YouGov survey, which has seen Theresa May's Tories restore their lead in the poll with a 1 percentage point rise. According to the poll, conducted on March 14 and 15 with a sample of 1,986 voters, the Tories are now on 42% and Labour are on 39%. Lib Dems are unchanged at 7%. A separate poll by Sky Data suggests just 18% of people think Mr Corbyn is doing a good job dealing with Russian relations, while 57% think he is doing a bad job. The Snap poll of 1,166 Sky customers was conducted via SMS.